Hello everyone, how you all doing? It's been a while since I last did one of these. It's mostly because a lot of stuff was going on, like raising money for St. Jude, which was amazing by the way. And I didn't feel like it was the right time to put something on the channel that was as serious as this. But here is vlog 2 in my thoughts on mental health and what I'm personally experiencing, which is not to advocate, it's not to draw attention or to advise, it's just purely my thoughts on what I'm experiencing with several aspects of mental health, not just depression or just anxiety, but everything that I struggle with mental health wise. And today is actually the subject that I wanted to discuss first time around, but I didn't because something else kind of took over and that happened, which was very good. I had to get that out. But today I wanted to discuss something that I have been struggling with for a very long time, and it's getting more intense as time gets on. The older I get, the more intense that gets. And that is guilt. I have a lot of guilt about everything. I will try and go through the points of the major causes of guilt for me. And I'll start with my past, because that's the most obvious, of course. I have a lot of guilt about my past. The way I've behaved, the way I've acted towards other people, the way I've treated other people, because I didn't cope with the situations I was in, and afterwards didn't cope with the effects those situations had on me. I know everybody does that, and I shouldn't beat myself up for it too much because, you know, it's in the past, it's happened. I can only learn from it. I can only better myself from that point onwards. But sometimes, you know, you have those 3 o'clock in the morning thoughts where you just go over everything and you're like, fuck, I was an awful person. So anybody who's watching this that I've ever done wrong, I am sorry. I'm sorry. But, you know, like I said, you can't keep beating yourself up over it. And most people that I have confronted in the past, like my parents, for example, I felt really bad about how I was as a teenager. And I know every teenager is quite a handful because of the hormones and all the changes and all the pressure, societal pressure at school, in the family. It's a lot for a young adult to be dealing with. But I felt like I was that much worse. But I've always been very self-critical, which doesn't help, which also made me backlash. So it was kind of like a vicious cycle. But I'm a lot better now, so I'm back to my kind, giving, caring self, which is what I've always been at heart, but I just didn't know how to cope with things, and it all went to a very destructive kind of way until my mid-20s. I was very, very destructive, and it was really hard to get out of that mindset because most mental health things seem to go in vicious cycles, and once you break that cycle, that's when you can make progress. But I just wasn't making any progress with this, so I quite often feel very guilty about how I was, how I behaved, the things I've said, how I've treated people. But what I wanted to say is that I have confronted people in the past, like my parents, about what in my mind I put them through. And because I felt like I was a horrible kid from when I was 13 up until 17. I felt like I was an absolute nightmare to deal with. But that's probably because I was in a nightmare myself, mentally. And yeah, especially my mom said, like, no, you were not that bad at all. What do you mean? You were actually one of the better behaved children when it came to a lot of things. I was like, whew, I just felt like a monster. So that's my point. Like, a lot of people probably didn't experience it as badly as you have, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, you know, have some remorse about negative behavior. But as long as you learn from it and you move on from it and you grow from it, then it has some meaning. The other thing that I feel really guilty about is lately, or the last 2 years or so, and that's getting more and more. Why is my camera glitching again? It always glitches when I do these. The last 2 years or so, I've been feeling very guilty about just being alive. And I don't mean that as in I don't want to be here, as in a suicidal type thing. It's more like existence of just being a human, basically. Because we have such a negative impact on the planet, on nature, animals, each other. It's very hard to put that in perspective and to rationalize a lot of things. And with me, I get into these mental loops, especially when it comes to self-criticizing, when it comes to not doing things right. And with me, because I love nature so much, and I love the natural world, I love being outdoors, and just actually I love living a simple life, you know, growing my own veg and being connected to that natural world where we all came from. And then I put on my nail varnish and I'm like, but that's bad chemicals, that's gonna go into the environment. But you know, it's just things like that. I every step I take on the grass, I'm like, you're crushing the grass and everything underneath it and all the animals, and like it spirals out of control like that. And but especially when it comes to plastic, when it comes to waste, when it comes to producing anything that negatively impacts the environment, I am so self-conscious and so guilty over. I'm not stopping any of these things. Like, I still do my nails because I'm like, well, they help me mentally as well. When I'm nice and groomed and, you know, I look nice for myself, I feel better. So that's a plus. But then it also makes me feel bad because, you know, it's waste. And I also have that with like money and stuff. Like, I don't like wasting money on anything. I find it incredibly almost hurtful when any money is wasted, and that probably stems back from being poor for quite a long time. But I don't like, for example, buying something and then it doesn't get used. I don't know, I feel guilty about everything, and I know that there's probably a side effect of something or other, maybe like being overly critical of myself again, but I just feel guilty. It also comes from the fact that I'm not working, so I'm not even useful in society. Not on that level. I mean, I'm useful socially. I'm useful because, you know, I help a lot of people when I can. But when it comes to the economy, I like being able to work. I like being able to be self-sufficient and independent, and I don't have any of that. And thus I feel like society views me as a waste of space. And that makes me feel guilty, because then I'm on benefits because I lost my job and I can't work right now. And then those benefits, I'm like, well, maybe somebody who's worse off than me is not getting those because I'm getting them. I'm taken away from, you know, I'm taken away from that allocated amount of money that could have been spent on somebody who can use it better than me. You know, it's just things like that. And I know it doesn't necessarily make any sense. I do realize that a lot of times I can't rationalize it. I'm like, no, that's stupid. You're just as deserving to receive that because you're in a tough spot. You are not able to work right now, you know. And the same with like eating and being alive and just having an impact on your environment. I mean, that's just the way that's just the way it is, you know. Animals have an impact on their environment too. It's just that they don't destroy it mostly. You know, it's just the way it is, and I can rationalize it in my head, but I still feel that guilt all the time, you know. And I just wish I had the means to make my impact as little as possible, but it's just not possible right now. I'm not in the position to do it. which is a real shame, but it's something to work towards. I just wish I didn't have as big an environmental impact as I do now. Having an invisible disability is hard, because I already have my chronic fatigue, which people don't see unless I'm really bad. And then usually I hide away from people so they still don't see it. And then my brain fogginess usually just gets met with irritation. People don't have any patience for that at all. Don't understand it, think I'm just either stupid or something else. But I guess I do really feel guilty about not having a visible thing that that lets people know that I am not well enough to work right now. I don't know. Does that sound weird? It sounds bizarre, doesn't it, when you think about it? But I do feel guilty about that. Like, I should be more outwardly dysfunctional and ill to justify the fact that I'm not working right now. Does anybody else have that? That was a really weird revelation in my head right now. God, that's really strange. Yeah, I guess I feel really bad about that. For not being more ill. When I know that in the long term, at least, in the short term I can do a lot of stuff. It's the long term that I'm worried about. It's the long term when especially brain fogginess really impacts on my work, and it's really hard to cope with. Everything else I usually can fight through, but if my brain doesn't function properly and I can't think straight, and my vision's blurry and I'm slurring and I can't even communicate properly because my brain is just basically too tired to function, that's when major problems occur. Like in my last job, I made a really big mistake that cost the company a lot of money. Not in my last job, the job before that. I made a mistake that cost a lot of money, and that doesn't help me, that doesn't help the company, doesn't help anyone, and it's a really big thing. So I'm always thinking about that, because I've seen several jobs now, and even an opportunity for like a apprenticeship that I really want to do, that I usually would jump on, but I can't, because I'm thinking in the long term. Like, yes, this would be great for a few months, but what happens after that, when I get too tired, when I get worn out, because I'm constantly busy and trying to keep up and trying to act normal and function normally, and then usually I relapse really badly, and then it snowballs from there on, and then I have yet another group of people that view me as useless. And the other thing that I also feel guilty about is another thing I can rationalize, of course, but it does creep up on me as I'm sitting here talking to you through a pretty good PC and a pretty good camera and the setup and everything around me, and I look at my house and I look at the stuff that I have, and although I'm not the most well-off person in the world, compared to a lot of others, I'm really well off, and that makes me feel guilty because I have all this stuff. Does anybody have this kind of thing, like guilt over everything? Like, maybe it's just because I want the best for everyone, and when I am pretty comfortable comparatively and others aren't, then I feel really bad. But those are the major points that really bug me and really bring me down every day. I try not to let it get to me, and I rationalize it, of course, because I worked hard. I've come from a really bad place. I lived for the longest time in a flat with just a mattress on the floor, and I had no other furniture, where my money issues were so bad that all I ate was rice for months and months on end, because that was the only thing I could afford. It's not like I haven't been through the worst, and even if you haven't, you still deserve the things that you worked for. It's not like it all came to me. I had to work hard for a lot of things. Anyway, that was just my bit for today, like all that guilt. And of course, to anybody else out there who feels guilty about everything like I do, we really shouldn't, but I get it. But you are worth it, and you are deserving. And I am as well. And most days I'm like, yes, you know, it's fine, it's good, you know. And once I'm in a better place again, of course I will give that back tenfold. I know that. But some days it's just guilt, 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 guilt. And I'm like... Anyway, let me know what you think. If you struggle with any of these things. If you have any tips, give it to me. Much love to you all. And I will see you all in the next one.